Hare Krishna, welcome everyone to today's Srimad Bhagavatam class. Before we start our Srimad Bhagavatam class, let's do a quick Mangala Charana. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaim Narottamam Deving Saraswating Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nasta Presha Avatareshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistikihi Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnana Salakaya Chakshuramadachanyana Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Nama Om Vishudaya Krishna Prestaya Putale Srimate Jayapataka Swami Iti Namni Nama Acharabdaya Nitai Kripabdayane Gorakatudam Dai Nirganam Tani Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Welcome everyone today to today's Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 28, entitled Jnana-yoga. So this chapter is the continuation of the conversation between Krishna and Uddhava, in which Krishna today is going to talk about Jnana-yoga. Jnana here means knowledge, yoga means the perfection to transcendental knowledge. So this chapter, Krishna is going to just very briefly, he's going to briefly summarize the process of Jnana Yoga. As we all know, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks in Bhagavad Gita first of Karma Yoga, and then above Karma Yoga is Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga in combination with Bhakti Yoga is very, very powerful, simply because Jnana here means that knowledge which removes doubt from your mind as to the glory of bhakti. So the combination of jnana and bhakti is very, very powerful. So let's start reading this chapter, starting with text number 1. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "One should neither praise nor criticize the conditional nature and activities of other persons. Rather, one should see this world as simply the combination of material nature and the enjoying soul, all based on one absolute truth." Text number 2. Whoever indulges in praising or criticizing the qualities and behavior of others will quickly become deviated from his own best interest by his entanglement in illusory dualities. So here Krishna is explaining, due to the desire of the conditioned souls to enjoy and to become lord of material nature, the soul inadvertently will criticize others and become envious of others. So similarly, one praises a superior materialist because one aspires to that superior position in which one may dominate others. Praising and criticizing other materialistic people are thus directly or indirectly based on envy of other living entity and causes one to fall down from one's real self-interest, which is Krishna consciousness. And Krishna here is explaining that by absorption in the temporary or unreal indicates that one should not adopt a concept of material duality and praise or criticize other materialistic persons. Rather, one should praise the pure devotees of the Supreme Lord and criticize the mentality of rebellion against this personality of Godhead, by which one becomes a non-devotee. One should not criticize a low-class materialist, thinking that a high-class materialist is nice. In other words, one should distinguish between the material and spiritual and should not become absorbed in good and bad on the material platform. For example, an honest citizen distinguishes between the life of civil freedom and that of imprisonment, whereas a foolish person distinguishes between a comfortable and uncomfortable prison cell. Just as for a free citizen, any situation in prison is unacceptable. For a liberated Krishna conscious devotee, any material position is unappealing. So a non-devotee or even an envious third-class devotee is not interested in uniting people on the platform of love of Godhead. Instead, he unnecessarily separates them by emphasizing material distinctions like communism, capitalism, black, white, rich, poor, liberal, conservative, and so on and so on. Material life is always imperfect, full of ignorance and disappointment. In the end, Rather than praising and criticizing the higher and low feature of ignorance, one should be absorbed in Krishna consciousness on the spiritual platform of eternity, bliss and knowledge. Text number 3. Just as the embodied spirit soul loses external consciousness when his senses are overcome by illusion of dreaming or the death-like state of deep sleep, so a person experiencing material dualities must encounter illusion and death. So here Krishna is explaining that due to false ego, one dreams of material world without the personality of Godhead and makes plans to lord it over nature to exploit her resources. A very good example of this is the modern atheistic scientists who have developed this false ego to a fine art and imagine themselves great heroes conquering the obstacle of nature and moving forward towards inevitable omniscience. Omniscience here means they know everything. There's nothing that they don't know. Such dreamy materialists are repeatedly stunned by the crushing reaction of the law of nature, and their arrogant agnostic civilization are repeatedly annihilated by the world wars, natural disasters and violent shifts of the cosmic situation. On a similar level, all conditioned souls are captivated by sex attraction and thus bound to the illusion of material society, friendship and love. They imagine themselves to be wonderful and joyous of the material nature, which suddenly turns against them and kills them, just like the tamed animal that suddenly turns on its master and kills him. Text number 4. That which is expressed by material words or meditated upon by the material mind is not ultimate truth. What therefore is actually good or bad within this insubstantial world of dualities, and how can the extent of such good and bad be measured? So here Krishna is posing a question. He is posing a question, putting doubt into our mind as to our ability to enjoy this material world. So the actual truth is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything emanates, by whom everything is maintained, and in whom everything merges to rest, that is the absolute truth. Not this material world. Material nature is the reflection of the absolute truth. And by the interactions of the material modes of nature, the innumerable varieties of matter appears to be separated, independent in truth. Maya, illusion, distracts the conditioned soul from the absolute truth and absorbs his mind in the glaring manifestation of matter, which ultimately is non-different from the absolute truth, being an animation from him. The sense of good and bad as separate from the Supreme Lord is like the good and bad dreams experienced by a sleeping person. Good and bad dreams are equally unreal. Similarly, material good and evil have no permanent existence separate from the personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord is the well-wisher of every living entity, and therefore execution of his order is good, whereas disobeying his order is bad. Lord Krishna has created a perfect social and occupational system called Varnashrama Dharma, and the Lord has further given perfect spiritual knowledge in Bhagavad Gita and other literatures. Execution of Lord Krishna's order will bring complete social, psychological, political, economical and spiritual success to human society. We should not foolishly look for so-called good outside the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such orders are called the laws of God and constitute the essence or substance of religion. Text number 5. Although shadows, echoes and mirage are only illusory reflection of real things, such reflections do cause a semblance of meaningful and comprehensible perception. In the same way, although the identification of the conditioned soul with the material body, mind and ego is illusion, this identification generates fear within him even to the moment of death. So this is the ultimate influence of the material world on the living entity who's trying to enjoy, so-called enjoy this material world. It just instills fear in them, that's all. Ultimately, our emotions should be absorbed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is eternal truth. Fear is forever vanquished when one takes shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. one can then enjoy the pure emotions of liberated life. Text number 6 and 7. The Supersoul alone is the ultimate controller and the creator of this world, and thus he alone is also the created. Similarly, the soul of all existence himself both maintains and is maintained, withdraws and is withdrawn. No other entity can be properly ascertained as separate from me. The Supreme Soul, who nonetheless is distinct from everything and everyone else. The appearance of the threefold material nature, which is perceived within him, has no actual basis. Rather, you should understand that this material nature, composed of the three modes, is simply the product of his illusory potency. So here Krishna is giving great detail, and is making a distinction between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his expansions. So Krishna here is explaining that even the one who created this material world, that is Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu is an expansion of Krishna, and Krishna says there that no doubt Mahavishnu maintains, with his energy, he maintains this material world. He maintains, he creates, and he destroys it. And Krishna is saying that this Mahavishnu himself is maintained. So this is actually very deep subject matter. So in the purport, it is Srila Prabhupada wrote here, foolishly the conditioned soul tries to lord it over material nature, but the Lord himself, being non-different from that nature, is the only true proprietor. In several places in Srimad Bhagavatam has given the example of a spider spinning its web by expanding thread from its own mouth. Similarly, through his own potency, the Lord manifests the material world, maintains it, and eventually withdraws it within himself. Although the Lord is the unique Supreme Personality of Godhead above everyone and everything, he is simultaneously and inconceivably non-different from everything. Therefore, it is the Lord himself who is manifest when the Lord creates. It is the Lord himself who maintains when the Lord maintains. And it is the Lord himself who is withdrawn at the time of annihilation. Text number 8. One who has properly understood the process of becoming firmly fixed in theoretical and realized knowledge, as described herein by me, does not indulge in material criticism or praise. Like the sun, he wanders freely throughout this world. So here Krishna is saying that every living entity emanates from the Supreme Lord and is thus naturally full of realized knowledge. But when one becomes attached to praise or criticizing material good and bad for one's personal sense gratification, one's expert knowledge of the Lord becomes covered. A pure devotee should neither love nor hate any aspect of the material illusion. He should rather accept whatever is favorable for serving Krishna and reject whatever is unfavorable, following the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. Text number 9. By direct perception, logical deduction, spiritual testimony, and personal realization, one should know that this world has a beginning and an end, and so is not the ultimate reality. Thus, one should live in this world without attachment. So here there are two main material dualities. The first duality is that one sees material good and bad, beautiful and ugly, rich and poor, and so on. The second is that one sees the entire material world as separate from or independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The first duality, that of opposites, is subject to dissolution by the influence of time. And the second duality, that of separateness, is merely a hallucination. One who is firmly convinced of the temporary, illusory nature of this world moves about freely, without attachment, although engaged in all types of devotional service for the Lord. Such a person is never entangled and remains cheerful and satisfied in the spiritual consciousness. Text number 10. Sri Uddhava said, My dear Lord, it is not possible for this material existence to be the experience of either the soul, who is the seer, or of the body, which is the seen object. On the other hand, the spirit soul is innately endowed with perfect knowledge, And on the other hand, the material body is not a conscious living entity. To whom then does this experience of material existence pertain? So here Uddhava is asking a very, very intelligent question. Uddhava is saying that the spirit soul is full of knowledge, not ignorant at all, but the material body is not even a living entity. And he's asking, who's the one who's experiencing all this, suffering in this material world? So let's read text number 11. The spirit soul is inexhaustible, transcendental, pure, self-illuminous, and never covered by anything material. It is like fire. But the non-living material body, like firewood, is dull and unaware. So in this world, who is it that is actually undergoes the experience of material life? Text number 12. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, as long as the fully spirit soul remains attracted to the material body, senses and vital force, his material existence continues to flourish, although it is ultimately meaningless. So the pure spirit soul voluntarily connects himself with the material body, considering this a most fruitful arrangement. Actually, the situation is useless on one uses one's embodied situation to engage in the loving service of the Lord. Actually, the situation is useless unless one uses one's embodied situation to engage in the loving service of the Lord. At that time, one's connection is actually with Lord Krishna, not with the body, which becomes a mere instrument for executing one's higher purpose. Text number 13. Actually, the living entity is transcendental to material existence, but because of his mentality of lording it over material nature, his material existence condition does not cease, and just as in a dream, he is affected by all sorts of disadvantages. Text number 14. Although while dreaming a person experiences many undesirable things, upon awaking he is no longer confused by the dream experience. So a liberated soul must observe material objects while living in this material world. But being awakened to Krishna consciousness, he understands that sensory pain and pleasure, like dreams, are without substance. Thus, the liberated soul is not bewildered by illusion. Text number 15. Lamentation, elation, fear, anger, greed, confusion, and hankering, as well as birth and death, are experiences of the false ego and not the pure soul. So the answer here is given. It is not the soul that experiences it. It is not the dull material body that experiences it, but it's the false ego. The spirit soul has falsely accepted to be the enjoyer, which is not the soul's position. Okay? Because why? The false ego is the pure spirit soul's illusory identification with the subtle material mind and the gross material body. As a result of this illusory identification, the conditioned soul feels lamentation for things lost, jubilation over things gained, fear of things inauspicious, anger at the frustration of his desire, and greed for sense gratification. And so, bewildered by such false attraction and aversion, the conditioned soul must accept further material bodies, which means he must undergo repeated birth and death. One who is self-realized knows that all such mundane emotions have nothing to do with the pure soul, whose natural propensity is to engage in the loving service of the Lord. Text number 16. The living entity who falsely identifies with his body, senses, life, air, and mind, and who dwells within this covering assumes the form of his own materially conditioned quality and work. He is designated variously in relation to the total material energy, and thus under the strict control of supreme time, he is forced to run here and there within material existence. So here the false ego, which causes the living entity to suffer material existence, is here described in detail as the illusory identification with the material body, senses, life, air, and mind. The word kala refers directly to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who imposes the limiting segment of the time upon the conditioned soul, keeping them tightly bound up under the laws of nature. Liberation is not an impersonal experience. Liberation is attainment of one's eternal body, senses, mind, and intelligence in the association of the personality of Godhead. We can revive our eternal liberated personality, free from the contaminations of false ego, by dedicating ourselves to the loving service of the Lord in Krishna consciousness. When the pure spirit soul accepts false ego, he must undergo material suffering. One automatically conquers the false ego by accepting oneself in pure Krishna consciousness to be the eternal servant of Lord Krishna. Text number 17. Although the false ego has no factual basis, it is perceived in many forms as the function of the mind, speech, life, air, and bodily facilities. But with the sword of transcendental knowledge, sharpened by worship of a bona fide spiritual master, a sober sage will cut off this false identification and live in this world free from all material attachments. So, in the translation, Krishna uses perceive in many forms. It means that it indicates that the false ego is manifest in the belief that one is a demigod, a great man, a beautiful lady, an oppressed worker, a tiger, a bird, an insect, and so on. By the influence of false ego, the pure soul accepts some material covering to be his ultimate self. But such ignorance can be removed by the process of Krishna consciousness. Text number 18. Real spiritual knowledge is based on the discrimination of spirit and matter, and it is cultivated by spiritual evidence, austerity, direct perception, reception of the Puranas, historical narrations, and logical inference. The absolute truth, which is alone was present before the creation of the universe and which alone will remain after its destruction, is also the time factor and the ultimate cause. Even in the Middle Ages, even in the middle stage of this creation's existence, the absolute truth alone is the actual reality. Text number 19. Gold alone is present before it's manufactured into gold products. The gold alone remains after the product's destruction, and the gold alone is the essential reality while it is being utilized under various designations. Similarly, I alone exists before the creation of this universe, after its destruction, and during its maintenance. So Krishna is giving here an analogy of gold. Gold, when it is in its original form, it is gold. After it is manufactured to become jewelry, earrings, or necklace and all that, it is still gold. After it is melted down back into its original form, it is still gold. So Krishna is saying here that before this material world was creation, there was the absolute truth, that is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. After Krishna decides to create this material world for our fulfillment of our desires, he is still the same Krishna. He is not changed in any way. After this material world is annihilated and everything merges back into Krishna, Krishna is still Krishna. He is not changed. Text number 20. The material mind manifests in three phases of consciousness: wakefulness, sleep, and deep sleep, which are products of the three modes of nature. The mind further appears in three different roles: the perceiver, the perceived, and the regulator of perception. Thus the mind is manifested variously throughout this threefold designation, but it is the fourth factor, existing separately from all these, that alone constitute the absolute truth. So the entire range of perception, cognition, and sensitivity is an insignificant expansion of the perception, cognition, and sensitivity of the personality of Godhead. What Krishna is saying here is that our ability, whatever ability we have, is actually from Krishna only. When we are our time is up and we have to merge back into Krishna. Krishna withdraws everything. So whatever ability that you might think that is you, that you think is you, actually it belongs to Krishna. The origin is Krishna. Krishna is only loaning it to you. You must think like that. Text number 21. That which did not exist in the past and will not exist in the future also has no existence of its own for the period of its duration, but is only a superficial designation. In my opinion, whatever is created and revealed by something else is ultimately only that other thing. So here Krishna is giving like a sort of a riddle here. Although all material products such as our body are temporary and thus ultimately false, and the material world is a real manifestation of the Lord's potency, the basic substance or reality of this world is the personality of Godhead Himself, Sri Krishna. Whereas the temporary designation imposed by the conditioned souls are temporary, they are illusion. Thus we consider ourselves American, Russian, British, German, Indian, black, white, Hindu, Muslim, Christians, and so forth. In fact, we are marginal potency of the Supreme Lord, but we attempting to exploit the Lord's inferior material potency, we have become entangled in illusion. Everything should be properly defined in terms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the essential reality of this and all other worlds. Text number 22. Although thus not existing in reality, this manifestation of transformation created by the modes of passion appears real because the self-manifested, self-luminous absolute truth exhibits himself in the form of material variety of the senses, the sense object and the mind and the elements of physical nature. So Krishna here is explaining about the actual process, the process of creation. It starts with pradhan. The material nature called pradhan is originally undifferentiated and inert. This is the energy that we see all around us. At first it was unactivated. Through his agency of time, Krishna glances upon this pradhan, this energy, and activates it by the mode of passion. Then this energy is transformed and it takes place and it exhibits as the Lord's inferior energy. In contrast, the Supreme Lord personal abode in Vaikuntha possesses eternal varieties, which is the self-luminous internal potency of the Absolute Truth, and is not subject to material creation, transformation or annihilation. The material world is in this way simultaneously one with and different from the Absolute Truth. The origin of both this material world and Vaikuntha is Sri Krishna. So in that sense, there is this similarity between Vaikuntha and this material world, in that sense that Krishna is the creator of both. Text number 23. Thus clearly understanding by discriminating logic the unique position of the Absolute Truth, one should expertly refute one's misidentification with matter and cut to pieces all doubts about the identity of the self. Becoming satisfied in the soul's natural ecstasy, one should desist from all lusty engagement of material senses. Text number 24. The material body made of earth is not the true self, nor are the senses. They are presiding demigods or the air of life, nor is the external air, water or fire or one's mind. All these are simply matter. Similarly, neither one's intelligence, material consciousness, nor ego, nor the elements of earth or ether, nor the object of sense perception, nor even the primal state of material equilibrium can be considered the actual identity of the soul. So Krishna here is giving very elaborate description that is telling us all that we are not our body. We are not that which is connected to this temporary material body. We are much, much greater than this material body. Text number 25. For one who has properly realized my personal identity as the Supreme Godhead, what credit is there if his senses mere products of material modes are perfectly concentrated in meditation. And on the other hand, what blame is incurred if his senses happen to be agitated? Indeed, what does it mean to the sun if the cloud comes and goes? So here Krishna is explaining in a very indirect way. He's saying that his pure devotees are eternally liberated. Okay, his pure devotees are not affected by this material world. So he's saying that sometimes his pure devotees might appear agitated, they might appear angry, they might appear disturbed. But he is saying that because they are situated in their constitutional position as being an eternal servant of Krishna, actually this agitation actually don't affect them. They are not controlled by the mode of anger or being disturbed by external things. And the example he gives here is that the exalted status of the sun is not changed whenever a cloud comes in front of it or it appears to be raining. The sun is the sun. The sun is always very peaceful. Text number 26. The sky may display the various qualities of air, fire, water and earth that passes through it, as well as such qualities as heat and cold, which continually come and go with the seasons. Yet the sky is never entangled with any of these qualities. Similarly, the Supreme Absolute Truth is never entangled with the contaminations of goodness, passion and ignorance, which causes the material transformation of the false ego. So the Lord saying is, the Krishna here saying that the Lord is eternally infallible and pure, and so are his pure devotees. Text number 27. Nevertheless, until by firmly practicing devotional service to me, one has to completely eliminate from his mind all contamination of material passion. One must very carefully avoid associating with the material modes which are produced by my illusory energy. So Krishna is giving here a good advice to all of us. Even though we might not be pure devotees, Krishna says here, we must put in effort to try to practice Krishna consciousness to please our Guru as to our best of our ability. And at the same time, we must try to avoid that which is not favorable for our execution of Krishna consciousness. So new bhaktas in Krishna consciousness, they are known as neophyte devotees. Neophyte. So to understand this term neophyte, you just remember the word fight. These devotees all tend to be argumentative and they tend to commit offense. So we should be very, very careful to remember this. We should not offend anyone in respects to our false identification. Text number 28. Just as an improperly treated disease recurs and gives repeated distress to the patient, the mind that is not completely purified of its perverted tendencies will remain attached to material things and repeatedly torment the imperfect yogis. So one who increases his attachment to children, wife and so on, although supposedly performing devotional service to Lord Krishna, is understood to be either a ku-yogi, as described in this verse, or a bewildered neophyte who has failed to properly treat the disease of the heart called material attachment. If one has repeatedly relapsed into material attachment, he has failed to eradicate the darkness of ignorance from his heart. Text number 29. Sometimes the process of imperfect transcendentalists is checked by attachment to family members, disciples and others who are sent by envious demigods for that purpose. But on the strength of their accumulated advancement, such imperfect transcendentalists will resume their practice of yoga in the next life. They will never again be trapped in the network of fruitive work. So here Krishna is saying that sometimes sannyasis and other spiritual teachers are bewildered by flattering followers and disciples sent by the demigods to embarrass these spiritual leaders who are lacking complete spiritual knowledge. Similarly, spiritual progress is sometimes checked by attachment to one's bodily relatives. Although an imperfect transcendentalist may fall down from yogic practice in this life, he will resume it in his next life on the strength of his accumulated merit, as described in Bhagavad Gita. A fallen transcendentalist does not have to pass through the lower stages of fruitive activities and gradually be promoted to the practice of yoga. Rather, he will immediately resume his yoga practice at the point at which he left it in his past life. Of course, one should not presume to fall back on the facility offered here, but should try to become perfect in this lifetime. Sannyasis especially should remove the knot of lust from their heart and should avoid falling into the clutches of flattering followers or female disciples sent by the demigods to expose a so-called spiritual leader who is imperfect in his Krishna conscious knowledge. Text number 30. An ordinary living entity performs material work and is transformed by the reaction of such work. Thus he is driven by various desires to continue working fruitively up to the very moment of his death. A wise person, however, having experienced his own constitutional bliss, gives up all material desires and does not engage in fruitive work. So Krishna here is describing somebody who is a karmi, a person who works and lives and does things simply to satisfy his desires. So these karmis, because of sexual association with women, they are driven to enjoy the female form again and again, and indeed these karmis remain lusty up to the moment of death. Similarly, through association with family and friends, the knot of material attachment becomes very tight. Thus the reaction of fruitive work binds one more and more in the cycle of material defeat. But a learned person who is in touch with the Supreme Lord within his heart realizes the ultimate frustration of material work and the dangers of entering the womb of a pig or dog in a future life as a result of sinful activities. One on the platform of self-realization does not regard himself as an enjoyer of the world. Rather, he regards the entire cosmos as simply an insignificant expansion of the Lord's potency and himself as the Lord's humble servant. Text number 31. The wise man, whose consciousness is fixed in the self, does not even notice his own bodily activities. While standing, sitting, walking, lying down, urinating, eating, or performing other bodily functions, he understands that the body is acting according to its own nature. Text number 32. Although a self-realized soul may sometimes see an impure object or activity, he does not accept it as real. By logical understanding, impure sense objects to be based on illusory material dualities. The intelligent person sees them to be contrary to and distinct from reality, in the same way that a man awaking from a sleep views his fading dream. So Krishna here is giving very, very good advice to all of us who are very much entangled in this material world. He is giving here an example of a sane person can clearly distinguish between a dream experience and his real life. Similarly, a manasi or intelligent person can clearly perceive polluted material sense object to be creation of the Lord's illusory energy and not factual reality. This is the practical test of realized intelligence. Text number 33. Material nescience, which expands into many varieties by the activities of the mode of nature, is wrongly accepted by the conditioned soul to be identical with the self. But through the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, my dear Uddhava, this same nescience fades away at the time of liberation. The eternal self, on the other hand, is never assumed and never abandoned. So here Krishna is giving hope. Krishna is emphasizing here that the eternal self is never assumed or imposed as a material designation, nor is it even abandoned. As explained in the Bhagavad Gita, the soul is eternally the same and does not undergo transformation. The mode of nature, however, creates the gross material body and subtle mind as a result of one's previous fruitive activities, and these gross and subtle bodies are imposed upon the soul. Thus the living entity can neither assume nor reject the soul, which is an eternal fact. It is an eternal fact. Rather, he should give up the gross ignorance of material consciousness by cultivating spiritual knowledge, as Andy indicated in this chapter. Text number 34. When the sun rises, it destroys the darkness covering men's eyes, but it does not create the object they then see before them, which is in fact were existing all along. Similarly, potent and factual realization of me will destroy the darkness covering a person's true consciousness. Wow, this is very nice. Text number 35. The Supreme Lord is self-luminous, unborn and immeasurable. He is pure, transcendental consciousness and perceives everything, one without a second. He is realized only after ordinary words cease. By him the power of speech and the life airs are set into motion. So here Krishna is explaining that he is self-luminous, self-manifested, whereas the individual living entity is manifested by him. The Lord is unborn, and the living entity, because of material designative covering, takes birth in the conditioned life. The Lord is immeasurable, being all-pervasive, whereas the living entity is localized. Supreme Lord is Mahanubhuti, the totality of consciousness, whereas the living entity is a tiny spark of the consciousness. The Lord is Sakalanubhuti, omniscient, whereas the living entity is aware only of his own limited experience. The Supreme Lord is one, whereas the living entity is innumerable. Considering all these contrasts between the Lord and ourselves, we should not waste time like the foolish material scientists and philosophers who struggle to find origin of this world by their insignificant mental speculation and word jugglery. Although one may discover some of the gross laws of material nature through material research, there is no hope of achieving the absolute truth by such petty endeavors. Text number 36. Whatever apparent dualities is perceived in the self is simply the confusion of the mind. Indeed, such supposed duality has no basis to rest upon apart from one's own soul. So Krishna here is explaining that our misidentification of ourself is called false ego, and this false ego actually is generated by the false identification with matter, and is a mistaken identity imposed upon the pure spirit soul. The sense of ego or I am, in other words, the sense of one's individual identity, comes from the spirit soul, because there is no other possible basis of such self-awareness. By studying one's false sense of ego, one can analytically understand that there is a pure ego, which is expressed by the word Aham Brahmasmi, I am pure spirit soul. One can easily understand in a similar way that there is a supreme spirit soul, the personality of Godhead, who is the omniscient controller of everything. Such understanding is Krishna consciousness, constitute perfect knowledge as described here by Lord Krishna. Text number 37. The duality of the five material elements is perceived only in terms of name and form. Those who say this duality is real are pseudo-scholars, vainly proposing fanciful theories without basic in facts. So because of the interactions of the five material elements, we get all kinds of material things, and all these material things they have name and form, subjects as they are to creation and annihilation, and have no permanent existence, and so do not constitute essentially fundamental principles of reality. The material world consists of variegated transformation of the potency of Krishna, of God. Although God is real and his potency is real, the particular form and name of that temporary or circumstantially appears have no ultimate reality. Gross ignorance occurs when the conditioned soul imagines himself to be material or a mixture of matter and spirit. And there are scientists out there that come up with all kinds of fanciful ideas saying that, because the spirit has now mixed with matter, now they are a new element. The spirit soul does not exist anymore. All kinds of funny ideas. But at the end of the day, all of them suffer from old age, disease and death, and whatever idea dies with them. Text number 38. The physical body of the endeavoring yogi who is not yet mature in his practice may sometimes be overcome by various disturbance. Therefore, the following process is recommended. So here, having described the process of cultivating knowledge, the Lord now gives instruction to the yogi whose body may be disturbed by disease or other impediments. Those inferior yogis who are attached to the body and bodily exercises are often incomplete in their realization, and thus the Lord here offers them some assistance and some advice. Text number 39. Some of these obstruction may be counteracted by yogic meditation or by sitting posture, practiced together with concentration on the controlling breath, and other may be counteracted by special austerities, mantras or medical herbs. So Krishna here is giving advice to all us aspiring devotees. As we become older, we will experience more and more pain. Krishna says here, we should attend to this pain and we should not focus our mind on these temporary bodily pains. Instead, we should focus all our energy on practicing loving devotional service for the pleasure of Krishna. Text number 40. These inauspicious disturbance can be gradually removed by constant remembrance of me, by congregational hearing and chanting of my holy name, or by following in the footsteps of great masters of yoga. So according to Sridhar Swami, by meditation on the Supreme Lord, one can overcome lust and other mental disturbances, and by following in the footsteps of great transcendentalists, one can overcome hypocrisy, false pride, and other types of mental imbalance. Text number 41. By various methods, some yogis free the body from disease and old age and keep it perpetually youthful. Thus, they engage in yoga for the purpose of achieving material mystic perfection. So here Krishna is saying the process described here is meant to fulfill one's material desires, not to bring one transcendental knowledge. Therefore, this process cannot be accepted as devotional service to the Lord. According to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, despite all such mystic perfections, the material body will ultimately die. Actually, eternal youth and happiness are available only on the spiritual platform in Krishna consciousness. Text number 42. This mystic bodily perfection is not valued very highly by those expert in transcendental knowledge. Indeed, they consider endeavors for such perfections useless, since the soul, like a tree, is permanent, but the body, like a tree's fruit, is subject to destruction. So here's a nice analogy. Krishna is giving an example here of a tree that seasonally bears fruit. The fruit exists for a very short time, whereas the tree may exist for thousands of years. Similarly, the spirit soul is eternal, whereas the material body, even when preserved as long as possible, is destroyed relatively quickly. The body should never be equated with the eternal existing spirit soul. Those who are actually intelligent, who actually have spiritual knowledge, are not interested in material mystic perfections. Text number 43. Although the physical body may be improved by various processes of yoga, an intelligent person who has dedicated his life to me does not place his faith in the prospects of perfecting his physical body through yoga, and in fact he gives such procedures up. So here Krishna is saying a devotee of the Lord keeps his body fit by eating nourishing Krishna prasad, by maintaining a clean and regulated life, free from unnecessary anxiety, and by chanting and dancing before the deity of the Lord. When a devotee is sick, he accepts medical treatment by normal methods. But beyond this, there is no need to absorb one's mind in the physical body in the name of so-called yoga practice. Ultimately, one must accept the destiny that has been ordained by the Lord. Text number 44. The yogi who has taken shelter of me remains free from hankering, because he is experienced the happiness of the soul within. Thus, while executing this process of yoga, he is never defeated by any obstacles. So here Krishna is giving the glory of those who are pure devotees, or even those who are not so pure devotees, who are aspiring and have desire to advance in devotional life. So in the purport here, there's a quote here by Srila Sridhar Swami. He says here, the Supreme Lord has briefly described to Uddhava the essential wisdom of all the Upanishads, with the conclusion that pure devotional service to the Lord is the real means of ultimate liberation. In this regard, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur emphasizes that although Hatha yogis and Raja yogis try to make progress along their prescribed path, they confront the obstacle and often fail to achieve their desired goal. However, one who has surrendered to the Supreme Lord will certainly be victorious on his spiritual path back home, back to Godhead. So here Krishna is concluding this chapter on jnana-yoga. It's a very brief explanation. But interestingly, in the next chapter, Uddhava will say that, my dear Lord, all of this is not very practical. You're asking me to perform renunciation. So please tell me a more easier method, more effective method. So next chapter is going to be about Bhakti Yoga. So please stay tuned for next week's class.
Krishna